Hello, and welcome to or back to my channel. I'm Kit, your friendly feminist cat lady spinster, and today we're going to talk about Lauren Chen. A few weeks ago, someone suggested my channel needs more Lauren Chen, and I aim to please, so here we are. And if you're unfamiliar with Lauren Chen, she's a conservative social and political commentator. Back in July, Lauren posted a video, Feminists Too Selfish for Children, which, as a feminist, I should obviously watch and comment on. Let's get into it.
Let's talk about how feminism has demonized motherhood to the point that it's now actually causing an existential crisis for Western society, and I wish I was kidding, but I'm not.
Feminism has demonized motherhood. Or it told women they don't have to be mothers if they don't want to be. Those two things are not the same.
So it should go without saying, although unfortunately it doesn't nowadays, that children are extremely important. Just from a personal mental health perspective, humans are social creatures. We are not meant to live our lives alone. And yes, I know sometimes friends can be family members, and I agree with that, but those family member friends aren't necessarily a replacement for children, and I think for a lot of people that gets glaringly more obvious the older that they get.
I love it when conservatives talk about this because they're obviously talking to people who can have kids but choose not to for whatever reason, and they completely forget about the people who can't have kids. So Lauren is basically telling anyone who's infertile that, well, it sucks to be you. Your spouse, your friends, your own parents, not real family. Only children can be real family.
And just from a more pragmatic standpoint, I also think it's worth mentioning that children are vital to the economy.
Please do not have children just to provide the country with future taxpayers.
So many Western nations are actually in trouble right now because there are more older people leaving the economy than there are young people entering the workforce. And what that means is that there are job openings, there are labor shortages, and there are also not enough working people paying into the tax system to support older people who are retired or their healthcare costs. And these problems can lead to things like ballooning national debt as countries borrow money in order to pay for their retirees because they don't have enough tax income, or things like very unwise immigration policies where countries try to import migrants in order to try to stimulate the economy, even though a lot of the migrants that they import can actually lower GDP per capita, which is a very different thing than overall GDP, and I think way more indicative of things like quality of life.
Immigration is a net positive for the economy, and I will link the study below. But it doesn't surprise me that a conservative is against immigration, though I am curious. Immigration is a big talking point in the US, but is it in Canada? I have a feeling that her talking points are geared toward an American audience, even though Lauren herself is a Canadian who lives in Canada.
And then from a civic perspective, children are also important because they are the building blocks of society. Traditionally, so much of what we now view government as being responsible for, particularly in regard to welfare and social programs, that used to fall on the family unit.
And how many people suffered because their families were expected to care for them and they couldn't?
But as the family unit has decayed, or perhaps maybe because the family unit has decayed, government has started to take on more and more of the obligations that traditionally your family member would look after, your general welfare. What happens if a family member gets sick or becomes unemployed?
Well, for a lot of people, even those in nuclear families, that means homelessness and possible bankruptcy.
And that's not even to mention childcare. So if you are someone who cares about limited, effective, responsible government, you should view the family as a good thing because the stronger the family unit is, it means the less there is for government to do. And just overall strong families undermine so many of the arguments that socialists make in favor of why government should be involved in every single part of your life.
I would like to hear Lauren expand on what socialism is.
So yes, whether you personally want children, I think it's important to recognize that children are important. And I know a lot of people watching this may not want children and they may feel attacked by this video.
I do not feel attacked. Being told I should have children is really nothing new.
But look, the way I approach people not wanting to have children is kind of the way I approach people not wanting to further their education. No one watching this, I think, would believe it's controversial to state that education is important for society and is beneficial for individuals. If I were to say that, there is like zero chance that someone watching this, okay, maybe not zero because the internet, people like to complain, but people wouldn't take me stating that fact as an attack on someone who wasn't pursuing an education. What I found is that when it comes to children and how important they are. Even if I'm speaking at a very macro general level, individuals who may not want children, they often feel very attacked. And it's like, I want to be clear with this video. I'm not saying anyone should be forced into having kids because people, frankly, who don't want kids make terrible parents.
I agree.
But let's face it, there are certain situations where individual choices in the aggregate do affect just all of us as a whole. Children are one of those choices.
Yeah, we're not going to try and pressure people into having kids, but we're going to suggest they're at fault for the destruction of our world.
And if you are someone who doesn't want children, I think you have to acknowledge and recognize that if everyone on the planet made the same choice you are making, that our species would end and society would just be kaput.
I've heard that before, and my response is always, so? If humans went extinct, none of us would be around to care, and that would be a great thing for the planet. Also, the sun is going to explode at some point, so humanity is going to end eventually anyway.
And the reason why I even feel the need to make that disclaimer or this video as a whole is that now more than ever, people are saying that they do not want kids. But as someone who has talked about this quite a bit, what I've noticed is that the reasons for men and women not wanting to have children, they tend to differ quite a bit. Oftentimes, what I hear from men is that they don't want children because they don't trust women to get married to or to have a child with because of how rigged against them the legal system is. I'm not saying that's the number one reason why men don't want children, but just from my experience, that's one that comes up the most often.
Okay, so men don't want children because they don't trust women.
Whereas when it comes to women, what I so often hear is that they don't want children because they would rather do things like pursue their career or travel, or just that they aren't interested in investing time in raising a child. To put it bluntly, selfish, narcissistic reasons.
So either way, women are failing. They're failing to gain men's trust, so men want kids, and they're failing to have kids themselves because they're so selfish. But you know what? Never mind the men. Let's focus on how selfish these women are.
And we're going to be going over two specific examples of this. So the first article I want us to go over comes to us in light of Roe being overturned by the Supreme Court, which has caused all of the feminists out there to come out of the woodwork to defend abortion. And it's funny, we often hear a lot of justifications as to why abortion is necessary. They often argue on fringe cases, things like incest or the dreaded R word.
Yeah, they're fringe until they're you or someone you know.
But the truth is, for honestly 98+% of abortions, the reason why women choose to have them is because of selfish reasons, because having a baby would inconvenience them.
Conservatives love to dismiss abortion as something only an irresponsible 20-something needs after a night out partying, but in reality, 59% of women who get abortions are already mothers. Also in reality, the reason someone gets an abortion is none of our business, and overturning Roe has made things difficult for doctors. From an OBGYN in Idaho, even medical experts cannot perfectly predict outcomes in pregnancy. How do lawmakers presume to make medical decisions for a patient without acknowledging or understanding the complexities of healthcare in pregnancy? It's great that Lauren's own pregnancy and delivery were without complications, but she needs to realize that the world isn't this shiny, happy place where bad things only happen to those who deserve it.
Which honestly is one thing if you think that having a child would inconvenience your life, but it's like usually people make that decision to not have a child before the child has actually been conceived. And so what I thought was interesting is that this Washington Post article, or comic rather, it's surprisingly and almost refreshingly honest about what abortion actually meant to this author. As this article is titled, "Abortion Let Me Live the Life I Wanted, Others Deserve That Chance." I mean, there you have it. This woman rejected motherhood to the point that she would have rather killed her unborn child rather than become a mother or put it up for adoption.
Adoption is the solution to parenthood, not pregnancy.
Because she wanted a certain life for herself, and this child, this human being, simply didn't fit into that picture. As these little comic panels explain, and I kind of think that making a comic was a strange decision due to the subject matter, but whatever. This woman actually had 2 different abortions, which she justifies by saying, "I've never wanted kids, and my ethics don't jibe with bringing unwanted babies into an overpopulated, dying world." So here we see her throwing out leftist myths like the world being overpopulated or dying in order to justify her abortion. But I mean, ultimately, she herself admits whether the world was unpopulated or not, dying or not, she simply did not want this child. She didn't jibe with it. So basically, basically, I'm sorry, aborted baby, but your life was ended because vibes, pretty much. And in subsequent panels, this author explains that she now has a happy life at 48, unironically pictured with her cats.
It looks like there's another person in that panel as well, along with some dogs.
And the final panel highlights things like adventure and freedom, where the author reiterates that her abortions allowed her to live the life that she wanted to live. So here we have a woman who literally puts herself first to the point that she would rather end human life than give up things like adventure and freedom, which I want to actually say as a new mother, you don't have to give up, at least not to the same extent that I think a lot of people think when you have kids. And look, ladies who might feel attacked by this, yes, it's true that there are plenty of men out there who are probably putting off children or not having children for similar reasons because they would rather put themselves first. But let's be real. There's obviously a way bigger push for women to have this me first narcissistic self-love mentality than there is for men.
Because traditionally, and this still happens today, women were and are the ones expected to sacrifice themselves caring for others, whether it's their children, their spouse, or their parents. And if you're happy to do that, that's great. But we need to stop expecting women to sacrifice their lives for others.
And having children just because you think you should have children or because society wants you to have children is not a good enough reason to have children. Again, if that's you, you're not going to be a good parent anyway. So I'm not highlighting this woman's story to say that she should become a mother or she should have become a mother. It's more that I would like to talk about what kind of upbringing or environment or culture is responsible for spawning so many women who think this way.
There is no leftist groupthink you can hold accountable for women vocally not wanting kids. We all arrive at that conclusion at different ages for different reasons from different angles.
Because unfortunately, our culture has become so self-obsessed that it is literally killing itself at this point. We've raised generations of people, but women specifically, who are so self-interested, who are so invested in putting themselves first above all else that it's actually going to lead us to a point where we can no longer sustain ourselves. And my guess is that most of you are plenty familiar with women who have this specific attitude that you probably don't need another example, but hey, just for kicks and giggles, here's one more. We have this Daily Mail article.
Daily Mail? Really?
Titled, Why I'm Never Having Children, a law graduate 22 claims she's too selfish, doesn't want her body to change, and hates kids' TV shows. So once more, if nothing else, I do appreciate the blunt honesty that's being displayed here. And while I definitely don't think it's strange or a bad thing for a 22-year-old to say, hey, I don't want kids at this moment because I have things I want to focus on in my life other than children, I do think proclaiming that at 22 you will never want kids, that's a very different story.
Well, I'm glad Lauren doesn't believe women have to start popping out kids at 18, but why does she care if this woman she doesn't know is saying she'll never have kids? Just because you say never out loud doesn't mean you're bound to it and can't change your mind.
So once more, when it comes to this woman, she does give the kind of fake reasons as, oh, I care about the environment and it's bad for that. And just, there are too many people in general. Specifically, the article says that this woman is worried about the state of the world.
Being worried about the state of the world is a fake reason to not have kids?
And it also mentions that she wants to focus on growing her 2 businesses. And that's all well and good. We hear that type of talk all the time, but before too long, we actually get down to the real justifications that she gives for not wanting to have kids. It's written that Lorella's top reason for not having children is that she considers herself selfish and that she enjoys her own time, money, and freedom that comes from not having kids. She said, I think that a lot of people aren't happy to admit that they are selfish and then they have kids and do nothing but complain. When I say I'm selfish, I mean I enjoy my own sleep, my own time, and my own money, and kids take all of that away. She also added that kids are just annoying. They annoy me in every sense of the word. They have no common sense. They can't drink. They have to go to bed early. They scream. They cry. They annoy me. Okay, so this is like not a parenting advice video, but I do appreciate how Jordan Peterson in one of his 12 rules for life talks about not raising children who annoy you.
Kids do scream and cry. That's unavoidable. Yes, it'll hopefully get better as they get older, but there's no way to avoid it, at least in the first year or two.
And that if you do find yourself not liking having kids or your kids specifically, it definitely means that you need to change up something about your parenting style because that kind of attitude or situation is not sustainable. But in any case, ultimately, I don't think because I'm too selfish is a good justification for doing or not doing anything because selfishness, despite what our modern society is is not a good thing. It's not a positive trait, but it's especially true when it comes to having children. And look, I know there are a lot of people who don't want kids who are watching this video who are probably really not going to like to hear this. But honestly, as a society as a whole, we cannot keep cultivating or encouraging this type of attitude. No, it's not the end of the world if this one woman doesn't want to have kids, but imagine if every single woman started thinking this way.
Well, unfortunately for you, Lauren, you can't control what other people do or don't do.
And already too many of them do. That is a problem that we all have to face. That is something that would lead to the downfall of our culture, of our society. And it is just very gross that feminists have taken the best parts, in my opinion, of being a woman, things like being nurturing and motherhood and that type of selflessness that comes from nurturing and motherhood, and they've really demonized those qualities.
Having kids is a personal decision, not a feminist one. You're not more of a feminist because you didn't have kids, and you're not less of one because you did.
And thrown them aside in favor of narcissistic things like body positivity and self-love, the idea that you are your own god.
Feminism isn't a religion.
The idea that your own happiness, or not even happiness, but just pleasure should be the most important thing in your life. It's toxic, and it is a problem for literally all of us.
That's how we get people just automatically hating feminism. People like Lauren stating that feminism is destroying society in one way or another. In this case, by fewer women wanting kids. Anyway, once again, everything is women's fault, and we should all be ashamed of ourselves. It's really interesting how Lauren proposes a problem, tiptoes up to a solution, and then backs away. Such as in this video, where she proposes that childlessness is a problem, immigration is not the answer, but feminism is to blame. But people shouldn't be forced into parenthood. No, feminism just convinced women that nurturing is bad, therefore, feminism is the reason women aren't keen on having kids. I wonder if it occurs to her that women in the past also didn't want to have kids, but they had no way to avoid it. And now that I'm thinking about it, in her last video that I covered on this topic, she dismissed trying the Nordic models to up the birth rate. So really, what is she suggesting? That women forget about themselves and give birth for the economy? Because it's no benefit to the earth to have kids. It's solely for the economy. And that's it for this video. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I would like to thank my patron, and if you would like to help support the channel, my Patreon is linked below along with my socials. Have a great day, night, whenever you happen to be watching this, and fade to cats.